It is good to be back with you again. Thank you for the invitation. Today's first reading, you did a great job doing all those big names. Today's first reading is an important reading, but it's hard to catch when you hear all of it at once. There are three brothers who are Jewish. Their names were Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. They were taken away from Jewish country to what we call pagan territory, the Chaldeans. And they were put into training so that they could serve the pagan king. For a Jewish person, this is hard. So they were almost like slaves. And a time came then when they had to renounce their God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is our God. And they would not do that. By the way, when they went to the new pagan territory, they were given different names: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In the Bible, normally, someone who gets a new name is someone who has been asked by God to do something, and God or Jesus gives them a new name. Abram becomes Abraham. Simon becomes Peter, the rock. This is the first time that people took their Hebrew name and they lost it because they were slaves and they were given a pagan name, trying to get a different identity. Because when you worship a false god, you lose who you are. Well, these three brothers then are forced to renounce God and they won't do it. So the king says, I'll show them, and he throws them in a fiery furnace. And he can watch them and see them, and he wants to watch them burn and die. That's how evil pagan can be. Because if you don't have the God on your side to show us the way of mercy and love, then murder becomes natural. That's not natural. The king is watching them, and he sees them, and they're not burning, and he sees a fourth person walking around with them. And he says, it looks like a son of God. We know the Son of God is Jesus, who's not yet born because we're not in the New Testament yet. But Jesus is not confined by our humanity, so he came down and joined them, and he saved them, because that's what Jesus wants to do with you and with me. So if you feel like you're in a fiery furnace, or you feel like you're out of control, you feel like you've lost, you feel like the whole world's against you, Jesus will find you and walk with you. And all you have to do is look for him, ask him, call upon him, even grab hold of him, and he'll lead you where you need to go. About 15 years ago, I was in India. I got to go visit with two priests from India who were serving in Nebraska, where I'm from. And one Sunday night, we had a dinner with a bunch of their friends, priests from all over who came in to join. And I'm sitting next to a guy who's a priest who drove 2 hours to be there for this dinner to see his friends. And I said, how long have you been in your parish? He said, about 7 months. I said, well, how's it going? He said, well, it's been tough. And I said, why? He said, because 8 months ago, so extremists came in to the parish that I'm now serving, and they burned down the church, and they found the priest, and they killed him out in the street. And I said, how long have you been there? He said, 7 months. I said, you went there a month after your predecessor was killed in the street? He said, yeah. I said, how do you do it? He said, well, we have to have Mass in private now. We do it in hiding. And if they catch me, they'll probably kill me. And I looked at this priest and I thought, I am nowhere near the priest this guy is. Like whatever he has, I want the ability to do that. To walk right into the eye of danger and say, I believe in something better. I'm not going to let violence get me off track. There are two stories from our tradition that I like, so I just want to end with those two stories. The first one is from the year 303, when the Roman Empire was still big. And in the Roman Empire, the Roman emperor was thought to be a god, a deity. Well, then Jesus came, gathered people around him, and then pretty soon Christians were formed who met the real God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who is now Jesus the Christ. And they know that the emperor is not God, so they're not going to adore him or worship him. They're going to follow Jesus. In the year 303, in what was then a country of Abytine, now it's modern-day Tunisia, it's a little country in northern Africa. And in the year 303, it was illegal for Christians to gather on the Lord's Day, Sunday, and celebrate what we now call the Mass. There are 49 adults, mostly men and women. And the short part of the story is that the governor of that area knew the elder who was the priest who offered the Mass. And he called him in and he said, I have orders from the emperor that if you gather on the Lord's Day to celebrate Mass, we have to kill you. We won't even put you in prison. We have to kill you on the spot. And the elder, the priest, said without hesitating, without the Lord's Day, we would die anyway. Without the Eucharist, we would be dead spiritually, so do what you have to do. He went back and he told his whole Christian community, all 49 of them, and they said, we have to celebrate Mass. So they were gathered on the Lord's Day to celebrate Mass, and all 49 were struck dead. They're called the martyrs of Abatine. In our Christian tradition, we have this wonderful, beautiful reality that wherever there's a martyr, the blood of the martyr becomes a seed where Christianity is going to be stronger. I've been to San Salvador where Oscar Romero was killed. He's a saint now, and Christianity is stronger today than it was when he was there because his blood helped people be strengthened and emboldened. We get together here in public. Our culture is becoming more anti-Christian and anti-Catholic. There are more martyrs in the last 2 years than the previous 100. The world is getting increasingly violent against us. So what do? We hold on to Jesus. I want to walk with him. The last story is from Russia when communism took over. When they said there is no God and there can be no religion, the Catholics would gather in secret in basements of people's houses and celebrate Mass. There's a story of people gathered in the basement, and all of a sudden the door is bashed down and 3 Russian soldiers come in. And they said, are you Catholic? Are you Christian? Are you going to celebrate Mass? If so, we have orders to kill you. If you're not, you can leave now. Half of them got up and left. The soldiers looked at those who were left and said, we're serious. If you stay here and Mass begins, we will kill you. If you're not Christian, you can get up and leave. Half of them got up and left. One of the soldiers went over and bolted the door shut. They were terrified, right? The soldiers took off their weapons, took off their armor, put them on the ground, looked at those who were left and said, we're Christians too. We had to see if you're really Christian. Can we join you for Mass? Whenever I heard that story, I say, thank God the priest stayed, right? So if he wouldn't have stayed, they couldn't have Mass. So I just want to propose to you today, who is the Lord to you? You get to do something right now that people have died for. If you were in that room in the basement and the Russian soldiers were in front of you, what would you have done?